Welcome to Count Me In. I'm your host, Adam Larson, and today I'm chatting with Ben Cena, co founder at High Value Author. Ben's not your typical publishing expert. He started out hating books and ended up building and selling a successful publishing business. In this episode, Ben shares why nonfiction books can be powerful tools for personal branding and business growth, and what separates few successful authors from many who struggle. If you've ever wondered how to turn your expertise into a high value book or what it really takes to become a recognized thought leader, you won't want to miss Ben's practical advice and insider insights. Let's get started. Well, Ben, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Excited to talk to you about folks becoming thought leaders and authors. And I wanted to get started just by asking what kind of inspired you to start helping professionals become thought leaders? And maybe you could tell a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, first of all, I hate books. I hated books, not hate books. I hated books when I was in school and college, and I think, no, it probably was by accident. I was a personal trainer in my past life. I'm still as passionate about health as I was. Maybe I'm gonna do that in another 10 years, but my colleague in the gym I was working, he was involved in publishing space. So he said he's doing this, and it kind of like made me curious. So we developed a couple of publishing businesses. We sold them for six-figure sums, back in 2018, 19, which is what really was self-published everything, So I think this was the start, and we really saw the trend on Amazon and how the books and how different solutions, and we just really discovered that, because I always thought that books are, the fiction stuff, the boring stuff nobody likes to read. This is what we were told in school, in college, and all these kind of things. Later on, I figured out that books are problem-solving tools, and that's what really hooked me in. And then later, after selling those couple of businesses on Amazon, we figured that people are really struggling with understanding what is the purpose of a book, the experts, the authority, all these kind of things, and the alignment, and how people are having completely different conversations with clients, investors, yada yada. If you know how to use a book and you know how to create this masterpiece of a tool, So I think really understanding that, probably that happened about 5 years ago in 2019, 2020, that's where the real shift happened. We realized there are so much untapped potential for so many experts out there. There are 65 plus million books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Less than 100,000 books sell more than one copy a day. Less than 100,000 books. Most books die after all the uncles and aunts buy them, right? In the first 2 weeks after the launch, right? And then nobody cares. And I think this is where it really started, where, okay, if we are really solving problems with those books, they should last years, not just, some nice little project which never came to fruition. That was my long-winded answer.
Yeah, no. It's interesting hearing you say that, especially about the numbers when it comes to books. How most of them just kind of all the aunts and uncles buy them, a little
Yeah.
hoopla, and then it just goes to die. Knowing all that, why would somebody say, "Hey, I want to now become an author"?
Oh, it really
Especially to like a
depends,
nonfiction book for business. Like, why would somebody want to become an author knowing that this is like the market for books right now?
Well, it really depends. What we really seen for the most part, for the main reason, right, which really people don't really share. They don't really say that reason off the bat, but they're saying, okay, I want to spread the message. Now, after a deeper conversation, we really figure that there are kind of like two main reasons. Like I said, one of them, really two main reasons. First, they want to take their personal brand and their name to a different level. Well, now, what does that mean? In most cases, that means I am in that world. And silly enough, that means I am smart. I am in a book world. I am smart. This is no. I'll give you some more numbers which might make you think. Year over year, I will not give you the exact number here, but physical book sales and ebook sales are growing every single year without exception since probably 2005. The readership of those books are declining on average about 7% every year from a total readership percentage. What does that mean? People are buying books, not really reading books, but they want to shelf them, show them in the background, on Zoom, all these kind of things. Now, why people want to become authors is to be one of those, in that shelf, to be perceived as the smart people, as people of intellect in that space, right? That's the first one. And the second one, after a bit more thinking, they realize that that is a great way to create conversations, create high ticket lead generation in current terms, and really bring in money, bring in real, talking to investors, talking to potential clients about big projects. If you know how to use a book for that and the positioning is right, it happens a lot if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Now, are there any success stories that you can share of people you've worked with? Obviously, you don't have to mention any names, but are there any stories of folks who gave this a shot and worked with you and were able to see great success in growing their business with it?
Yeah, sure. So one of the people that we are worked with and still working with, he's lived in Dubai, and we really tracked data on that, where we managed to scale. He's in education business, online education. He's selling products, building relationships with people, and we really managed to use this tool to educate people on what he's doing and move people to his program, which is between $5,000 and $9,000 for the most part, right? And I think I'll not give you the exact number, but it's between 2,000 and 3,000, which he collected in a span of about 8 months after the launch of a book, directly from a book, which we managed to count from the pathway that was created, not even counting, people who read it and then came back later, these kind of things. So it's probably more of a specific kind of vague story where it really works and it's really more measurable. The other thing we also did with one of the clients is, after the launch, we were scheduled for a conference where we wanted to position a book, and I think there was 100 seats, right? And we decided to gift every person, every manager, which was for managers, right? He's in a space of talent acquisition in corporate environment. Right? So for him, it's more about opening conversations with building relationships, right? And what we did, we decided to go after the strategy, like a more physical strategy, and plant 100 books for those 100 people and create a presentation in a way to use that book as a leverage so then people can book a call with that person during a conference for every single person who have a book. And I think we had like 50 calls booked from those 100 people, right? So I think this is
Wow.
more like a more juicy, to the point examples of, if you know how to use it right and you're really going after it, you can really, one conversation changes everything. One conversation can give you a return on the investment or the time spent on a project like this. Of course, most people don't do it. It takes either work or working with some team who knows what we are doing. But you have to know why you're doing this. What do you want this book to do? This is one of the main questions I ask on the initial call when I have with people. What are you trying to achieve with your book? And usually we don't really have a strong reason. And I'm really pleased to talk to some people sometimes where they say, okay, the reason why I want this book is because I want to build my personal brand and I want to create a bridge and create this networking opportunity with this kind of clients. I love that answer. This means this person knows what he's talking about. And usually these are higher level people who really understand that kind of language, that kind of possibility, right? So for anybody listening, you really have to look at the book not as a passion project, because for the most part, it is not. Some people say it. There is a reason why 97% of people never 97% of people who start the first chapter never finish is because they don't have a reason why they started. And when they have financial obligations every single day, no matter if they're in business, if they're in corporate environment, you are going to go after whatever else you have to do opposed to your passion project. That happens every single time. That's why people never finish, unless you have a clear vision on what you want to accomplish with this particular book and what you want this book to do for you, for your personal brand. And usually it has to be finance related. Otherwise, it's more difficult to justify it.
Yeah. So let's say somebody's listening to our conversation. They're like, I'm really curious about this. I want to be seen as a thought leader. Maybe I could write a book. What are those first steps they should take if they want to start moving in that direction?
It's an interesting question that you ask, and I like how you phrase it, this question. The question is, do you want to write a book or do you want to publish a book? That's a distinction.
Okay.
Most people cannot write a book unless if you're an amateur writer, then I might suggest, but I would assume that most people listening to this, they're busy. They have things going on. They're entrepreneurs, they're high level managers working in corporate environment, right? So you really have to, almost by exception, partner up with somebody who understands the process and can say, okay, if you want to accomplish this, this is a pathway. If you want to accomplish that, this is a pathway, right? You really have to know those kind of things. And it's really difficult to just have a ChatGPT chat with somebody, right? And say, well, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do this, and it never comes through. So you really have to consult with somebody. But now, what are the first steps? First of all, you have to, I'm going to go back, but you have to know why you're doing this. Now, once you know the reasons why you're doing this, the first step is to create an idea, right? How that idea ties up to your goals. The idea is usually the main title of a book. And that's the connection between the title and the cover. It's a magic combination, the magic duo, which I always describe. And this is also part of the reason why whenever somebody works with us, we always capture at least some part of the book cover in the very beginning. Not at the end. Most people do it at the end. Okay, I have my book finished, and now I'm going to do the cover. You want to see how it looks like. You want to know what kind of words are you using to grab your reader and grab your ideal customer potentially. So then you can say, okay, here is my idea and here is how it matches with my goals. So this is where the whole journey starts. Not writing, not even the outline, but the title and the cover. That's where it starts.
Yeah. So as they're going through that process, let's say they're
and
like,
it cannot
yeah,
happen in the shower. It cannot happen in the shower, though.
It can't happen in the shower?
It cannot happen in the shower. But the shower idea usually doesn't work.
Yeah, but maybe a shower idea can be molded into something that's really good over time, of course.
Of course, it can, but it has to be justified with what is out there and with the research. It has to be justified.
Yeah.
It can be born in the shower, but it cannot be structured in the shower. Let's put it this way.
Yes, of course. So are there common challenges or things to look out for as somebody's kind of walking down this path? They've got the idea, they've started the process. Are there challenges that they're going to face that they should, be aware of, that they should, because it's obviously not a walk in the park. You're not just going to say, oh, I'm writing a book, and then 2 days later you have it all written.
Expectation. Have clear expectations of what is going to happen, right? One of the other questions that I ask always before we work with anybody is, how much time are you willing to commit to this? And not just willing, I would phrase it differently. How much time can you conservatively, or you would want to conservatively allocate for this kind of project? And I
Yeah.
don't want to give an hour amount to anybody. I want them to think. And usually most people say, well, I can do 10 hours a week. Or some people say, well, I can do 4 hours a day. And that's usually just nonsense, right? Now, you really have to know and set up the expectations right. Now, the right answer usually lands between 5 and 15 hours. Again, really depending, closer to 15 if you, for some crazy reason, you decide to write everything yourself. Now, that's going to get closer to 15. If you're working with some team who know what they're doing, that's going to be much closer to 5, or sometimes even lower if you know your customer very well, if you know the kind of message and the structure of a message and what you really want to share very well. The more you know that, the less time you need, the less communication has to happen between the professionals and you as, I call it like a raw material. The author is usually the raw material because the uniqueness is attached to the person. Right? So the person has to provide that raw material to create this masterpiece. So setting up the right expectations and knowing, okay, it's going to be 5-month process, 6-month process. And on average, you're going to have to allocate this amount of time. On average, I'm not saying every single week. No, things happen. We're in business, all things happen. But not having the right expectations and saying, well, I'm going to do this amount of hours, I'm going to do this and this and this. And the second week, oh, I have to travel there. I have to go there. I have to meet these people. And then everything falls apart. And that doesn't happen. That's the biggest mistake people make.
Yeah. I want to circle back to something you mentioned about the topic, how important it is to understand the topic to the fullest extent. And, what does it look like from an author's perspective? Obviously, if you're getting help, that's helpful. But, if you're trying to be a thought leader, there's a certain amount of research and understanding of the topic as a whole to be able to explain it in a way that you can write it down as an author.
Yeah. That's a very good question. Now, there's a two-way answer to this. First of all, the question back to that person who is thinking about that is, on how well do you know that person you're writing this book for? Because it always comes back to, what are you trying to achieve and for who? And the reverse engineering from that is much easier than just saying, this is the idea, or this is that idea, right? It doesn't work like that. You have to really think about serving a particular person and saying, okay, what would capture that person? How would that person understand it? And then align that with your style. The alignment then happens with, here's the kind of personality you have. Now, the second important part of this is, the question is where you're going for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Are you trying to change something in your business? Are you planning to change the career? Or are you staying in the same business? Are you going to up your skills? Are you going to change if you know that answer, and I have numerous conversations with people all the time, right? If your plan is to go after this market in these many years and your customer, for example, changes, well, it's going to be different. The idea is going to be different because you're going to be talking to maybe a different kind of person. So it's more, you have to answer how well you know the customer and reverse engineer from that. Plus, you have to know where you're going. What is your plan for a foreseeable future? Because then you ask me about the mistakes people make. If you cannot really align the future with the book, the motivation is gonna be drained. You're not gonna be constantly inspired unless you can consistently see the connection between where you're going and what you're doing. And the book is the big part of what you're doing. So that's the
Yeah.
answer.
Well, that makes sense. So let's talk about what happens after the book's written. What role does things like social media, online presence kind of play in promotions and just making sure that because obviously you can write a book and post on social media, but it's more than just that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Depending on the person, depending on the situation, the phenomenon with books is that I always say to people, and that happens almost every single time, the book and the message of a book is almost always more powerful than the person who wrote or who is the author. People care more about their problems and the solutions that they're gonna get than the person who wrote the thing, right? It even goes back to the old days of me growing a self-publishing business. These were no-name authors, no-name people, and we create really great books around that, and people loved them, even though the author behind the books was not the exact person who was on the cover. Now, understanding this piece, and now you're saying, okay, here's your name here, and now here is a problem that you're solving. Now then once the book is out there, you realize that social media and your presence can help only with very partial things. The initial boost a little bit, right? But if you really want a lasting success, the biggest platforms on in the world, Amazon, no question about it. It owns more than 65% of the total market in the Western world, right? I'm not counting China here, but in the Western world, it's more than 65% of combined ebook and paperback and hardback sales, and even Audible now is over 65%. The platform rewards problem-solving books, and the algorithms reward those kind of books that there is a market for, and you are addressing that. So your social media presence will give that initial boost, which is going to tell a platform like Amazon that you're serious about this. After that, it's not going to do much. So the real marketing starts at the very beginning. And one of the biggest tools, which most people not use, is Amazon ads. The native system of Amazon, which Amazon really loves and people are using it, which really helps to take your book to lasting success. Now, I know what most people are going to think. Well, now maybe I don't have the money to invest. The goal is not to make money with Amazon ads. The goal is to build traction and not lose any money, to create the traction for a book, for your problem-solving book for many years to come. And we found that as one of the most powerful tools that can create that success, and that's what it is.
Yeah. I know there's people who, who may love the idea of becoming a thought leader, even writing a book, but they're maybe hesitant about sharing their expertise because it causes them to become more visible. And maybe we can weigh the pros and cons and kind of talk through that. And, maybe there's questions people should ask themselves and, hey, should they take that next step and maybe shouldn't?
Yeah. No, and I'm drawing this as you're asking the question, because there is like two questions that people have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And usually two reasons why people are hesitant. On one side, the truth has to be told. Most people who are hesitating to do that, they do not have, or they don't think they have the competence, in turn the confidence, to put their material out there to be judged. People with competence and a combination of confidence and aka their expertise, they usually don't have that problem. So that's on the one side. People really have to ask themselves, is it an inner confidence issue, or is it a real competence issue? Meaning you are not there yet in terms of what you want to share. And I really usually help people to answer that question, because this is really usually that's an inner confidence problem, right? And it's really difficult to overcome. It has nothing to do with the book. It has more to do with I'm not there yet. On the other side, people who have the confidence in their own expertise, the procrastination comes in where they're thinking, I want to make sure this is done right and very well. So they're either looking and looking and looking for the right person to write it with, right? Or, which usually happens like that, and life happens, they keep hesitating because they are not sure how to put it together, how to package that expertise. Should I do it myself? Should I do it with somebody else? I am a very much expert in this. Nobody is going to write it better than me, right? That kind of game starts playing in their heads, right? The answer to that is usually you have to talk with somebody who is an expert in their space and can give you an honest answer by saying, here is what I believe you need to do, right? Just like I told you in the beginning. If you are at least an amateur writer, you can write your own book, and if you have time. In most cases, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Even you are the best and most powerful expert in your field, you're not the expert in putting those ideas in a long-form book. You're not. And you will probably never be, right? So you have to talk to somebody that you can respect and start working on that.
So how would somebody find that somebody that they respect to work with? Let's say, hey, I do a little bit of writing on the side. I want to write a book, but I know that I can't do this all myself.
No, you have to talk to people. You have to talk to people. Many times people come to us, after numerous conversations, right? And again, it goes back to the same thing. What goals are you trying to achieve? It's not just about the book. It's not just about having a person to put the ideas in a full, very, very flowing way. It's not just about the writing. You really have to create this match of, okay, you understand what I need to do, even better than I do, meaning aka the expert, right? Okay, now we probably have an alignment, which in our organization, what we really seek to accomplish is that, okay, we really know what you want to happen here. Let's see if we can make it happen. And many times, because we learned from our mistakes in the past, we were working with people that we probably shouldn't be working with just because there was not the right amount of clarity in terms of what we want to achieve. And that kind of clarity is needed. So you have to talk to people. You have to really talk to at least a few people, right? And say, okay, this is the person that I want to work with. And I can trust them. I can see some examples of their work. I can see this, I can see that. Okay, now we can start building that relationship, start working on a project like this.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of vulnerability, it seems, that's needed in order to be ready to write. Am I correct in that understanding?
Well, again, Adam, you ask the question, you structure the question, ready to write. Now, it's not about ready to write only, it's more about ready to put your name out there with a book, right? Are you ready to put your expertise or what people are going to perceive as your best piece? That's what people are thinking. If you're going to put the book out there and people are going to read it, I want to make sure this is the best representation of me, right? And that's where people are very struggling with that in the beginning, beyond everything else. Now, are you ready for that? Usually there has to, some psychology work has to happen here. It's like, okay, are you ready to, it's like, I used to be, like I told you, a personal trainer by past life, are you ready to make a change? I was hearing back in the day, for some people are like, well, I weigh over 40 pounds over what I probably should weigh, but that's me. That's like kind of me. I don't know if I want to lose 40 pounds. And that's the same here. Are you ready to put your stuff out there? You really have to work it out. You really have to talk to some sort of a expert / psychology involved person in this field to say, okay, you are ready. And most people are ready. We just have to, again, know the reasons why we're doing that. And if you can justify the reasons, you go after it. Reasons. That's all it is.
Well, Ben, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your expertise with us about becoming an author. And I just really hope everybody got as much as I did from it. And I just thank you for coming on.
Of course, Adam. It's my pleasure.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.